Good afternoon. Today I decided to pair the two poems together. I was to do Growing Down yesterday and The Clockman yesterday, but instead, since yesterday was Writer's Wednesday, I posted discussion questions for you to consider after reading both poems. Today, we're going to look at the comprehension questions on them. First, Growing Down, written in 2011 by Shel Silverstein. Shel Silverstein was an American poet, cartoonist, screenwriter, and author of children's books. He sold over 20 million copies of his books. And in this first poem, he tells an adult that he should try growing down rather than growing up. As you read, take note of what it means to grow up and to grow down. Mix a grunt and a grumble, a sneer and a frown, and what do you have? Why, old Mr. Brown, the crabbiest man in our whole darn town. We all called him Grow Up Brown. For years, each girl and boy and pup heard, grow up, grow up, grow up. He'd say, why don't you be polite? Why must you shout and fuss and fight? Why can't you keep dirt off your clothes? Why can't you remember to wipe your nose? Why must you always make such noise? Why don't you go pick up your toys? Why do you hate to wash your hands? Why are your shoes all filled with sand? Why must you shout when I'm lying down? Why don't you grow up? Grump, grow up, Brown. One day, we said to Grow Up Brown, hey, why don't you try growing down? Why don't you crawl on your knees? Why don't you try climbing trees? Why don't you bang on a tin can drum? Why don't you chew some bubble gum? Why don't you play kick the can? Why don't you not wash your hands? Why don't you join the baseball team? Why don't you yell and jump and scream? Why don't you try skipping stones? Why don't you eat ice cream cones? Why don't you cry when you feel sad? Why don't you cuddle with your dad? Why don't you have weenie roast? Why don't you believe in ghosts? Why don't you have pillow fights? Why don't you sleep with your teddy at night? Why don't you swing from monkey bars? Why don't you wish on falling stars? Why don't you run in three-legged races? Why don't you make weirdy faces? Why don't you smile, Grow Up Brown? Why don't you try growing down? Then Grow Up Brown, he scrunched and frowned and scratched his head and walked around. And finally he said with a helpless sound, maybe I will try growing down. So Grow Up Brown began to sing and started doing silly things. He started making weirdy faces and came in first in three-legged races. All day he swung from monkey bars. All night he'd lie and count the stars. He tooted horns, he banged on drums, he spent $20 on chewing gum. He went to all the weenie roasts, and once he thought he saw a ghost. He got to be great at pillow fights and went to sleep with his teddy at night. He flew a kite, he kicked a can, he rubbed some dirt upon his hands. He drew some pictures, threw some stones, ate 47 ice cream cones. He got some sand between his toes, got a loose tooth and a bloody nose. He got a dog, they rolled in mud. He imitated Elmer Fudd. He climbed a roof, though no one asked. He broke his wrist, he wore a cast. He rolled down hills, he climbed up trees, he scuffed his elbows, skinned his knees. He tried to join the baseball team. When they said no, he spit and screamed. He cried when he was feeling sad and went and cuddled with his dad. He wore a hat that didn't fit. He learned just how far he could spit. He learned to wrestle and get tickled, sucked his thumb, he belched and giggled. He got his trousers torn and stained. He ran out barefoot in the rain, shouting to all the folks in town, it's much more fun, this growing down. Number 1. All right, which is the following best describes the theme of the poem? And in this poem, we can see that old man, Grow Up Brown, he was kind of stuck in his ways, kind of set in, as some of the kids would say, just being a old person. They think that 40, y'all think that 40 is old. And so in this text, Grow Up Brown, we don't know exactly how old he was, but he was able to go take a nap with his dad or cuddle up with his dad. So he was probably about 40, 30, 40 years old, but he was just grumpy. And so the theme here is that he always worried about them getting dirty, and he worried about them arguing, and he worried about them being noisy. But the kids, they didn't worry about anything. All they did was play and enjoy life. So there, our answer would be that the children don't have to worry. And then we need evidence to support they're not worrying. Let's say later on in the poem, he decided that it's much more fun growing down. He started to enjoy himself eating ice cream and playing around and climbing trees and such. Okay? What does it mean, number 3, when the speaker suggests Mr. Brown try growing down? It's not being nicer. It's not aging, because everybody has to age, and it's surely not being less responsible, but it is that they just want him to act younger. They want him to be able to appreciate what's going on in his life and not just be so grouchy all the time. And number 4, which statement describes the difference between the speaker and Mr. Brown? We can obviously see that the speaker is a child. Mr. Brown is an adult, so let's get rid of some. C says that the speaker is an adult. Let's eliminate that. And then D says that the speaker is a child trying to grow up, and that wasn't the child's mission. It wasn't to grow up. It was that he wanted to enjoy his life. So A says the child embraces life, and B says the speaker is a happy child who enjoys life. It's going to be one of those two. Let's see what it says about Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown is an adult who originally doesn't embrace life, or Mr. Brown is an unhappy child. We know that Mr. Brown is not an unhappy child, so there we have our answer in number 4. Let's go to our next poem, The Clock Man, also by Shel Silverstein. He passed away in 1999. He, again, was an American poet, cartoonist, screenwriter, and author of children's books. And at this time, the child is going to have a conversation with the clock man. So let's take notes on how the person reacts and feels about time. How much would you pay for an extra day? The clock man asked the child. Not 1 penny, the answer came, for my days are as many as smiles. How much would you pay for an extra day? He asked when the child was grown. Maybe $1, maybe less, for I have plenty of days of my own. How much will you pay for an extra day? He asked when the time came to die. All the pearls and all the seas and all of the stars in the sky. All right. This time we have a person who is growing up, a young child who. There are 3 stanzas. In the first stanza, it's a child. In the first stanza, a person is an adult. And then in the third stanza, the person is elderly. All right, so which of the following describes the theme of this poem? People care more about time as they get older. That is a strong possibility, because that person was asked the question 3 times, and there was a different response each time. B, children often feel like they will never get old. I'm not sure that would be a good choice for that, because eventually children will grow up and get older. See, there's nothing more important to people than staying young. So when the child was young, he or she didn't value being young, because the person said, "My days are as many as smile." Like, I've got plenty of time. I don't need an extra day because I've got plenty of time. So let's eliminate that. And then the people are afraid of death their entire lives. In the first 2 stanzas, I'm pretty sure that person wasn't afraid of death. So let's go with people care about time as they get older. Because the first time, my days are as many as smiles, meaning I have plenty of days in me. I have a lot of laughter, a lot of time. And second, maybe I'll pay a little bit, but I've had plenty of time, plenty of days of my own. And then finally, I'll pay all the pearls and all the seas, which means now life means something to him, if that makes sense. All right, number 3. What is a clock man? A detail for number 1. So we chose that people care more about time as they get older. Now we need evidence, and we did just say that all the pearls and all the seas. Now time is valuable to this person, and he's willing to pay for it. All right, number 3. What does the clock man represent in the poem? The title is The Clock Man, and he is asking him how much he will pay for an extra day, and day meaning the concept of time. So that is our answer there. And then finally on number 4, how do the person's feelings about time change throughout the poem? How does this person's feeling change throughout this poem? A, he values time more than he did as a child. That is a strong possibility. B, he grows more negative about time as he ages. I wouldn't say that he's getting negative, but I do think he's thinking more about how much time he has. C, he is satisfied with the time he has left. We're going to disagree with that one, because he's starting to appreciate the time as a construct, part of his the question he's been asked is, how much would you pay? He's starting to value it. That's the word. He's starting to value time a little bit more. And D, he's angry that he cannot buy any more time. So that will be a no. So now we know that stanza 1, I wouldn't pay a dime for it. Stanza 2, I'll pay $1 or maybe less. And stanza 3, I'll pay with all the pearls and all the seeds. Time has now become valuable to this person, the speaker, as he or she has become older. So that will be our answer there. All right, so make sure that you check out the discussion questions. If you have not answered all these comprehension questions, do so. And then we do have 3 discussion questions on the Facebook page. Check those out. Also, make sure that you have logged into Google Classroom. And in Google Classroom, there are several tests that I've posted. There's a Would You Rather that has probably expired now. I can change that date if I need to. There's a context clues quiz that's on there. That'll be very, very helpful for figuring out what words mean. So please take a look at that context clues task. It's on Quizizz, so it is a game, about 15 or 20 questions. It shouldn't take long, but make sure you look in, around, and within the sentence, and for clues of what the word could possibly mean. And that's what we have for today. And I will see you in tonight's Zoom meeting at 7. Have a good day.